Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support.
Hey there, rulers! Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to the Teacher's Lounge, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast with intro by Ryan Miles, hosted by myself, DMO73, Jeremy Franklin, and I am joined, as always, by Ryan Miles.
I'm Ryan Miles, and I'm joined, as always, by Brandon Bremont.
Yep, down below. Yes. Brandon Bremont back. He's back.
Show upon you knowledge, and you are welcome.
I felt like Crocker from what's it called? From Fairly Odd Parents. So I'm just like Brandon Bremont.
And I am here with Joshua Patton, who is somewhere here.
He's over there.
He's somewhere.
And I am realizing that I am probably 2 weeks away from being replaced by Frank Klosser.
Start the clock.
Someday.
Start the clock. It's back down. the timer just appears in your box, like countdown till Frank appears.
Like I've seen this anime.
Raid boss in 2 weeks.
Frank makes a good raid boss.
He does make a good raid boss. So before we get into it, I do want to say thank you all so much for being here and participating. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you want to support the channel and get access to all kinds of cool perks, including being part of the chat box, you can join the channel as a member. You can go ahead and click that button right down below. It says join. It is a minimum of $2 a month, all the way up through $30 a month, based on what you want to pledge. Different pledges get you different amounts. And it goes to directly support the channel. Another interesting little metric that I always share is becoming a member at $2 a month is about equivalent to watching 400 of our videos in the span of a month. So, like, it's a pretty big toss-up in terms of, like, being able to support us and directly financially support what we do. And you get access to all...
with quarantine.
Yeah.
400 hours.
Yeah, now I'm going to watch 800 videos a month and give you $2.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Thanks, buddy.
Let's go.
So rolling in the dough.
So speaking of quarantine, speaking of viruses, we're here to talk.
Brandon Bremont's here. Yay!
Hey! We're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the idea of a viral meta, speaking of the concept of a card or a deck quickly kind of taking hold and latching on and becoming this thing that pretty much everybody is playing or everyone is wanting to play or trying their hand at, even if it's not necessarily the best thing at the format, but it is something that just like quickly takes over and quickly becomes like the thing that you see the most of. This has happened a lot of different times in Force of Will's history, and so we kind of want to talk about that. We're currently experiencing something like that right now with Prissya, but kind of want to share our thoughts about why we think this happens and like what are some of the good ways that we can like distance ourselves, topical, to try to get ahead of it and make sure we don't have to fall victim to playing it as well, or we can counter it and keep ourselves safe from the infection of having to play that deck. Man, we're getting topical here. See now, Ryan. So the thing is, for the longest time we had the puns, and then you left and Brandon left, and the puns dropped, and now you're back and Brandon's back. So I have to start bringing the puns back. Like,
so can I just say, I think you're absolutely right in everything you said. But if you think that this is a bad viral infection in Force of Will, then you have not played very many really bad Force of Will metas. This isn't even the worst red-green Prissya virus that we've had.
Yeah, right. It's not. This is. I like to call this virus SBBR-12. That's my virus name for it. It's SBBR-12. It's the friendship virus is what we'll call it.
This podcast is a friendship virus.
It's infectious.
So we'll start first with throughout Force of Will's history, you're talking about now, everything else. What is it that we think lends itself, or what kinds of decks or what kinds of cards lend themselves to these kind of like viral takeovers of a meta, in your idea? Anybody can jump in.
So the biggest thing is uninteractivity. This has been a problem in Force of Will history for a very long time. Things like Levitine, Severing Winds, like these kind of cards that come to mind when you think of what are the most ridiculous cards they've ever printed, Cheshire Cat's Assistance. All of these cards either do their thing very, very quick or don't allow other players any opportunity to play around them because they either they create a J Ruler with Swiftness, which back then was much harder to deal with, or Severing Winds, obviously just nothing ever played around ever. And so when cards do that, your only choices are either to fall victim to it or do it yourself. And when that happens, most people will want to choose to just start doing it themselves. So that creates the infection that spreads out into the community.
And I would probably like put in context, especially here for this Prissya one, like I wouldn't say like there's twofold here to where like the virus can be like completely like the meta tier 0 kind of stuff, but then it can also be like what I've talked about before, like the tier 2 cloud. And it's really just, in my opinion, what I've found is it is whatever is done the fastest and the easiest usually ends up being. So like in context of what we're dealing with right now, this super beast rush, essentially what it does, and like in the way that I view it, is like you have to have answers to that card in your deck, period, end of story. If you're not, you're going to lose at many tournaments, right? So like in my mind, that's the quarantine part. Like you are very limited in your freedoms in the game. You have to respect this one entity and build everything around it. So like freedom goes out the window. You have to answer this one specific thing. And so looking back in Force of Will's history, that's kind of where sometimes they're tier 0, but sometimes it's really just the masses doing what is fastest and easiest, and you still have to respect it because it'll clap you.
Similarly,
that's what we're dealing
to
with.
like Keurig in the past, in a similar sense.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Like,
I'm with you.
In the U.S. meta for the longest time, like Keurig was pretty widely among the top players acknowledged that it was definitely not tier 0, but it was still a deck that like you had to be mindful of, acknowledge what the Keurig players were doing, recognize the Keurig players were going to be there, and like build to respect it. Otherwise, you just get clapped. Similarly experienced with like IU. Like we've had those kinds of decks throughout Force of Will's history, and I think you're right. I definitely think that Prissya, specifically SBBR, is a similar kind of thing where it's not like tier 0, but it's like you have to respect it. Otherwise, you're going to show up at a tournament, get clapped by it. Like that will happen at least once.
Yeah, I think on the Keurig point and also IO to an extent, like Lorite was that end all be all, like not lose the game to that kind of stuff. And that's like part of the like we saw Lorite in almost every deck that was competitive, and like part of it was because Lorite was such a good card, but also because like if you weren't playing Lorite in your deck, you just lost to IU. When I played like Loki machines at that one GP, I lost to Keurig because it's like, wow, I actually just don't beat Welser ever because I just don't have Lorite. Like there were like a lot of things in those decks that just like you could not beat if you did not have certain cards in your deck. And I think Super Burning Beast Rush is a card where like there isn't really a good answer for it. It's like counter spells and that's it. So you have to be green. Obviously the best counter spell is Kaguya, but Kaguya has some problems right now with not having a green-white dual stone. So your consistency kind of goes out the window when you try and play a Kaguya deck, and then you can't throw consistency out the window when you take the other 36 cards in Prissya. You know, you can't let them go like turn 1 like Claw into turn 2 like Sisei's Hot Springs plus Mole. Like then they just have too much damage on board out the gate, and you also still have to beat Beast Rush.
If I can quickly go back to the Lorite example, I think there's another great point there that we're going to come back to a lot, which is cards that are themselves their own best answer. Like another good reason to play Lorite is because the best way to beat their Lorites was by playing your own Lorites, and so that also causes everyone to kind of snowball into having to play it. And so, and we'll see that that's a recurring theme too.
That's kind of the definition of a vaccine, eh? Don't you just kind of you take the virus and you kind of tweak it a little bit so that it cures the virus?
Oh no,
Josh! Thank you so much. The puns continue.
Does that mean that Gil was the vaccine because like Lorite was supposed to be played in Gil, so like that's kind of the dead version of it, but it still beat everything? Like,
so what I'm hearing is there is no vaccine for Super Burning Beast Rush because the answer to Super Burning Beast Rush is not play your own Super Burning.
One of the things that I think is that I want to learn more about SBBR is, and I'll speak to the fact that I haven't been able to play in this meta a ton because I've been doing a lot of other projects and like things have taken me away from truly being able to like watch it post Vegas, because I think we can all agree that like Vegas to a sense was kind of like the first versions, so we haven't necessarily seen like the optimized evolution of this card yet. I'm trying to figure out what it is about this card that is kind of the vulnerability of it. is it that the vulnerability comes from the fact that we can't ever remove the friendship counters, so it's just going to get like progressively bigger over time? Is it the fact that it's so easy to do so much damage because like it's a really great finisher because the deck is naturally able to put so much damage on board early? Is it from the fact that like when you combine it with Claw, suddenly all these tokens get super massively big? Like all of those things about it are very, very good, but the question to me is like which part about that is like the true like source of what we need to be trying to target? Does that make sense?
I think the answer is what I said originally, which was that it's non-interactive. Like it's very difficult to deal with. Obviously, you have Kaguya that can counter. That's the best thing. But like even if you like perfect Loki in response, yeah, maybe that deals with the tokens if they're not big enough. But then it still does the damage and draws the strangers. Maybe you have the parry, which deals with the damage, but then not the tokens or the strangers. Maybe you have Loki and the parry, and you still have to deal with however many strangers they end up drawing. And so it's like it's very difficult to answer every part of it except for exactly Kaguya, and we kind of already talked about why Kaguya can struggle against these decks with its improper stone base.
Yeah, it's very hard to like, even when you low roll with that card, it still feels like it generated enough value to get you going. Like I've played against it a number of times, and so like when I'm counting and they're just like, yeah, look, I didn't burn you and I only made like 1 token, and I'm like, thank God. And they're like, but I recovered 6 stones and drew like 4 strangers, and I'm like, well, that still sucks for me.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like crap.
So they cast it on 2 stones with like 2 stones in the claw, and then they just roll nothing but recover stones over and over.
That's how I play the card. That's like my preferred way to do it. I mean, I usually cast the card on like turn 3. I've played it a couple times in New Frontiers against like the other stranger decks, and I've played it more in Cluster, which is on the OLS right now. And like you just like get 4 or 5 stranger counters by like turn 3, and you just play it. And it's like, well, I rolled stone twice, but I also summoned 2 10/10s with swiftness, so I guess I low rolled. Like there's not a lot of low roll. Like at worst, you're just playing the card for basically 0 mana and then also doing something else, which is just good. And then you've got 4 copies in your deck. Like I'll just draw like 2 copies and be like, I can throw the first one down, no problem. And then in the long decks that are trying to just like actually just control Prissy out of the game, make sure she never has a Regalia, so her guys are always small, make sure they're discarding their hand so there's never any strangers to worry about. Like you just sit around and get to 8 mana and you win the game because you just deal 4,000 to your opponents. Like you really need to have counter spells or just like aggressive discard, and then you need to like cross your fingers and hope they don't top deck it.
So I saw someone talking previously about this idea of, because we have red-black dual stones, and again, this is something to just like question you about, like where's the vulnerability, right? Of like you just need to set your camera to do autofocus, Josh, to not do autofocus, but is the idea of like black rune decks specifically that are playing like black red for like Regalia break or plus like jet black wings, because like 6/6 is like the curve in terms of most of the creatures for that deck. So the idea of like using Regalia break to steal the Regalia and then immediately following it up with a jet black, which can't be cheated, so you can just wipe the board that way. So like in talking about that, it's kind of like what Bremon's saying, where like, yeah, okay, you have an answer for like a couple of the modes of SBBR, but what if they get the other ones? Like that's kind of the weirdness of that card, is the fact that you choose at resolution. So like, even if you try to quote unquote answer it, your answer could be absolutely the worst thing that you possibly could have done because they just don't hit that mode. You like don't have a way to hit all 4 modes at once.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm actually finding is like the more that I'm playing Prissy, like the lists are starting to get a little bit more optimized. So the gas out part of Prissy is almost kind of disappearing, because what I'm finding is like the first 4 or 5 turns, you're just always playing cards that generate cards. And so like I'm playing a lot of games where like I think I've only had 1 game where we've gone into top deck mode, and that was like turn 6, 7, and it was a Prissy mirror. And like we just had a weird start, and he was playing like a beast version, and so like that beast version, when you're playing the Firefox or when you're playing the other stuff along those lines, I'm trying to think what other ones. Like he was playing more cards that didn't draw cards than what the conventional lists were doing. But I think that's one of the other things that I'm finding with Prissy, is that she is also doing kind of what Kirik was doing, just always maintaining a hand, and that is silly. It's absolutely silly to have as much power as she's doing and maintaining a hand.
Yeah, her like I mean, we used to joke that a 1-mana 9/9 was like the most broken thing you could do on turn 1, but now it's like you play a 1-mana 3/3, but it'll be a 9/9 in a couple turns.
It'll be eventually, right?
Yeah, and you're also just like pooping out dudes that are just going to be like 12/12s in no time, and it's like, well, that's kind of silly because you don't have too much of a window to interact with the resonators. You kind of have to be perfect Loki to keep up with like the amount of dudes that they just throw out. Yeah. So I really like when you have to have perfect Loki in your deck, and then the answer that we're saying is the best answer to Beast Rush is Kaguya. Well, there's 4 colors in your deck just out of 2 cards, and now your consistency problems really plague you. If you just miss on the incorrect stones, you're not going to be able to play the game at all because they're just going to do prissy things.
And guess what? You're playing 4 colors, which means you're probably a divinity ruler, which means that they're equipped with a card called Don't Cheat that kind of...
Yeah, it gets rough. I'm still not like convinced that Prissy is like insane, but it is like a very difficult problem to deal with.
I think honestly, like, so to be honest, to go back to our analysis of it being a virus similar to a virus that shall not be named right now because otherwise YouTube will kill us, like legitimately. So don't say it. Is that even if you're playing against it, sometimes like it's still not guaranteed that it's gonna kill you, like, and that's the weirdness of it. But it's almost kind of like you can kind of hedge it a little, but sometimes you just kind of have to let it run its course, and then it just isn't going to be successful. Like the feature match that we're going to be putting up later this week is myself playing against I was playing Valentina Gorgons versus we're going to talk about your camera after this judge.
I got it.
You're good.
There you go. I'm proud of you. So I was playing, it's Valentina Gorgons versus Prissy, like Sacred Beast stuff, and you're going to see that like Valentina Gorgons is not like the optimized, like the best version of Valentina. Like it is purely to be just to show off the new cards, and like it's a fun deck to play at your locals and everything else. But like even in that matchup against Prissy, you can see that like sometimes Prissy just doesn't do what it wants to do, and like everything else. And that's similar to all Regalia decks right now, really. It's just sometimes they just don't show up. And so like kind of the best thing that you can do is hedge your bets, have some answers that you think are going to kind of be there, and then just like play through it, right? So it's kind of a different situation. It's similar to Keurig, right? In the sense of like, if your matchup, you like be mindful of it, be aware, take the precautions to prepare yourself for it, and then just play through. Like that's kind of, and sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose. And I know that there are some players in the community who will then catastrophize that and make it sound like we're all going to die and it's going to be the worst thing ever. But that's not the case. Like
you ain't lying.
That's not like
you ain't lying.
That's
Jump
just not the case
right now.
I want to be very clear really quick. I know we're talking about this deck a lot because it's so topical and it's a good conversation, but don't take this as any illusion that we think this deck is tier 0.
Correct.
It's definitely not.
It's definitely
not even a little bit. I'm not even convinced it's the best deck in format. Like it exists, but it's definitely worth talking about.
It's a gatekeeper. It's definitely a gatekeeper. Yeah. Of the new Divinity rulers, I think it's the most gatekeepery.
It's so weird to like think about because you can like talk about the deck and it could have an answer to every situation, but because like you were talking about the card draw, but the card draw is mostly in strangers. So in terms of like actually drawing it itself in its own deck, you really only got like Qinglong, and then it's like not unreasonable to like
Percival and the Mole and like.
Are they playing Percival?
They're playing Blue Percy. Really. They're playing Blue Percy to get off of Magna so that they can like dig for Super Beast.
But I mean, you got to think about it. Like the Springs get you a card, the Mole gets you a card, Huanglong gets you a card. Like,
but none of those cards are Super Burning Beast Rush. Is I guess my point.
Well,
like,
Percival is potentially.
The Blue Percival, I haven't seen the Blue Percival list, and that just sounds kind of wild in my mind. But like,
I do want to say real quick, welcome Gage Thompson. Welcome as a new member on the channel.
Gage, welcome, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you for engaging with us. Sorry.
Most
but
of
I
the
am
success,
actually. Go ahead.
Most of the success that I've had against Prissy, like even with like Val in like Cluster or even like Val in New Frontiers, is just any deck playing Look of Corruption can kind of look at a Prissy hand and be like, wow, that's a really strong hand. Unless you don't have this card, and then it's like, oh no, like now I don't have the extra, like now I don't have the extra friendship generator to get my Mole online, or you took my Claw, and now I don't have anything like.
I have found that the Prissy deck does not survive without Claw. Like Prissy hands that don't have Claw do not feel strong
right,
at
because
all. Like,
I agree wholeheartedly. Like in my games against Prissy, like if you can rip the Claw out of their hand, successfully cancel the Claw,
or destroy the claw like effectively, like not in the sense of like instant speed, so you're not like wasting your stuff on your turn. Like the deck the deck is just putting out a bunch of 6/6s. Like that's not a lot, right? The problem is you eventually the problem is for those decks is oftentimes those decks are going to get to turns, if they're curving right, they're going to get to turns 5, 6, 7, 8, which at what point in time is the turn of like, do they have SBBR? Did you get them to discard it? Did they awaken it for 8? Did you not cancel it? The game's over. Yeah. Like that's the risk of it. And it's kind of one of those things where, like we're talking about, you play to your outs, you hedge your bets as best you can, and you push through, and sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it's not. But I think the really important thing, as it has been in the past, just the main thing to seek is that does not elevate its status to tier 0. By comparison, like comparing it back to, let's flip it back to like the original red-green Prissya, which I think we can all agree was absolutely a tier 0 virus, right? Like, like pretty much. Like
Dane Patey would disagree.
I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm waiting. He's like
here, man.
Yeah. Somebody tell Dane.
Arrived and then vanished. Who is this guy?
So,
anyway?
Like in that situation, that deck was so consistent, like absolutely so consistent, and had so few outs that like the whole deck was fine-tuned on being able to do this one thing super effective, but then that one thing also was super hard to answer, and super fast. Right,
and there was like a whole deck besides it too. Like,
and there was also a whole deck around it.
Do.
Right. Yeah. So like, and the rest of the deck was really, really strong. In Prissya's sense, without those like key, and this is Regalia rulers in general, I think.
Yeah, they're so dependent.
Without those key linchpin cards, Regalia decks just crumble. And so like that's, we've spoken to this before, how the design of Regalia rulers has been pretty solid in that sense of like, it's not just, hey, look at my really amazing 40-card deck, and oh, by the way, I happen to have Regalia. It's, no, I'm a Regalia ruler. I really need this. Like,
yeah, it's so funny. It's like exactly the opposite philosophy of the rune rulers, where like they always had 5 cards they could always pick from, and they were like generally okay. And the Regalia rulers were like, I have 4 broken cards in my deck. Hopefully, I get them.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the biggest things between AO1 and AO2 was the ability to actually go get those out of your deck, right? So like think about like what AO1 was doing, and it was like filtering top 5 with its Percivals. Maybe you'll see it, maybe you won't, blah, blah, blah. And then like in AO2, that's when you get like Maribella, which will just go search the damn thing. Yeah. Then you've got the Mole, which will just go search the thing, right?
And so then like, Valentina's got... Oh, never mind. Continue.
Valentina's a control deck. She'll just naturally draw more. It's fine.
Just play Esper and play Awakening of the Sacred Queen. It's fine.
Didn't mean to steal your thunder. Continue.
No, but yeah, it's been crazy. I think what I'm most looking forward to with Prissya, though, is we're actually getting to a point where in the true evaluation of Prissya, we need to understand the kind of curve on when to drop SBBR, because like as Ryan was saying, he drops it on like turn 3, averaging what, 4 or 5.
I would say I would need like 4 counters, and then like playing it would give me my 5th to want to play it on 3 is right. Like my like litmus test usually.
Yeah.
And I have actually been finding that like if you want to know about Prissya mirrors, go play Cluster. Like it's just Prissya mirrors all day.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what I've actually been finding is that there's a lot of good data there in terms of like how early to play the Super Beast Rush. So like in my personal opinion, which is like Ryan's more red mage, I guess, in that case, because like I actually like waiting. Like that card is like my last card that I want to play. I will beat you with every other card in the deck, and then I'll just have this in my hand. And if you don't die to the rest of it, then you will die.
Yeah,
like that's my approach to Super Beast Rush.
An oops, you're dead finisher. Yep.
But like in all the mirrors that I've beat so far, they aggressively play that early, right? Like turn 3, turn 4, 4 or 5 counters, and it just doesn't. I don't think there's a lot of like. So we've talked earlier about the deck kind of being potentially brain dead, but I think this is one of those decks that if you want to start putting a lot of hours into it, you can actually be the best Prissya player by understanding the odds, because there's a shit ton of RNG, and you got to know like where you're at in terms of like what your probabilities are. when you're playing that deck, and it's matchup dependent. It is absolutely matchup dependent. So
yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of brain room there, I think, in this deck to have some fun with.
And I think it's also so go ahead, Ryan.
I don't think it's as skill intensive as Keurig mirrors used to be, because that matchup was like it was a brain dead deck, but the Keurig mirrors were absolutely ludicrous. But like what Prissya, the thing with like playing just a raw beast rush on like 3 is I've still got 3 more in my deck, so I'll probably find another one, and I definitely won't need to play 2 in the same turn like ever. Like I'll probably just win off of 1 if it's on like turn 5, turn 6.
If you could play 2 in the same turn, then you could awaken it, which almost always wins the games.
No, because when you play the first one, you could untap stones. So
sure,
it's like very easy. But like,
no, I've had people play 2 in a turn.
Yeah, no, like I sometimes like I'll just have 2 in my hand, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll just play 1, and then either I'll kill you or I'll recover enough stones to play my second one, and then probably kill you. Yeah, but it's just like it's so frequently just like a free card that is also like I really, really want the beasts. That's like the high roll. Strangers aren't bad, and then the low roll is just dealing damage to my opponent's face. And if the low roll on like this card being on turn 3 is just accidentally dealing 1,500 to my opponent, and that's my worst case. I mean, like the actual worst case is like untapping 5 or 6 stones when I don't have that many stones. But like the next worst case is like dealing 15 to my opponent's face and getting no actual value. Just like drawing a stranger, summoning 2 beasts, and untapping 2 stones for 4 is insane. And because I'm like rolling 5, like there's just too many good options to not want. Like that is my most powerful card, so I want to play it as early as possible to make you have to deal with hopefully the board that I'm presenting or the strangers that I'm generating. I just think it's so insanely high value at like 5 counters that the worst case scenario just justifies playing it, and then I still have more in my deck, you know.
It's 2-0 in cluster, right?
I'm 1-0 in cluster, but I'm like struggling to think of what can beat me outside of another super burning beast rush. So
yeah, for sure.
It's just like I don't know.
We might have a nice little pressure mirror here.
We might. We might.
Yeah. So I think in thinking about. So naturally, we talked 2 weeks ago. We talked about the idea that Vegas was this fresh on the scene meta. You know, what cards were people able to get? What cards were people wanting to play? You know, flavor did play a spice into what we saw at top tables, everything else, yada yada. And we know that Ghost in the Shell is going to be coming out the same weekend as Minneapolis, so like take with a grain of salt. But I think the biggest thing to take from this is getting ready for Minneapolis, especially as we wait for spoilers and stuff, I think it's really important to view your testing in the sense of if you choose to not play Prissya, which I think first off, you can choose to not play Prissya and still like expect to potentially do well at a tournament, just because it's not just like play this or lose. Like I remember in, you know, speaking back to original red green Prissya meta when I qualified for Worlds the second time, like I was going to Toronto and like the only thing in my brain was like, okay, if I want to go back to Worlds, I have to play red green Prissya. Like that's absolutely the only thought in my mind. Going into Minneapolis, I don't think you don't have to think that. I think we've talked that about is like you can play Prissya if you want, and it is strong, and you will potentially be very successful with it, but it doesn't have to be the only thing you have to do. So I think the lesson to take is if you don't want to be on Prissya, you have to be testing with Prissya in mind and like acknowledging its presence in the similar way that we've had to respect Ayu, we've had to respect Gil, we've had to respect Keurig, like, but you should, in fact, it will benefit you more to look at the meta as a whole while still considering Prissya's presence in it. Because I think the worst thing that you can do is like wholly gear yourself to only like focus on purely beating Prissya and then show up to a meta like we had at Vegas where there was 12 different rulers.
Yeah.
And you just like get absolutely like blindsided by something you weren't expecting because you were so focused on just beating Prissya that you didn't respect the rest of the meta.
And I promise that Vegas was not a fluke. There is going to be a shit ton of Melgus in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Everyone loves that guy.
It's the same reason we had so much Keurig since Scheherazade came out. Like we just our American system.
Yeah, but okay, no, time out. American,
the red part of the red, white, and blue.
But why Melgus and not Prissya?
That was exactly what I was going to ask. Because like Prissya is just a starter deck ruler too.
It's red. Yeah. It goes fast. It beats face. Why Melgus?
Because it can deal. Because it can deal 24 on turn 1.
I can already tell you because they've already logged 3 months worth of playing with this damn thing at their locals, and so they're just gonna keep riding this thing for a year.
The Keurig mentality.
I don't know about
the Keurig
year. I think Prissy is going to be more popular than Melgus. Like the deck is so easy; it's just a starter deck. Like it obviously won the GP and put 3 others in 3 total in top 8. Like,
yeah, but have you tried to assemble this deck? It is expensive,
right? But I think like when everyone's building for Vegas, like they look at the Prissy spoilers, and it's not an aggressively intuitive deck to build. Like you look at the 4 Sacred Beasts, you look at the Hot Springs, and you think, yeah, Hot Springs is really good, but do I really want to play those 4 Sacred Beasts in my deck? And until you just like kind of throw it all together and jam a couple games on it, because there are hands where I play Prissy where I just draw like 2 Sacred Beasts and no Hot Springs, and I'm like, wow, I'm not playing this game at all. Like it's just, it feels so bad. And if you like sleeve up that deck, draw 1 hand, and you're like, well, nah, this is useless. Let's go back to playing Melgus. Like it's a totally real thing. Like it takes a decent little bit of finessing just to get that base
and
list
also
of like
tech cards.
a Prissy deck you want.
I'm just
also
sort of,
tech
like,
cards
now
for Prissy
realizing that I've never played Melgus versus Prissy. Does anyone know how that matchup goes?
So
it's dependent on a lot of things.
Here's the cheat code of Melgus is sometimes, and this is totally Sam, like this is Sam words, not mine. Sometimes Melgus just wins because it can.
Yeah, I believe that. I just 100% believe that.
You have no idea. I was so furious on stream. I'm like watching like misplay. Turn 5, Judgment, Goddard, he wins. I'm like, this isn't fair. This isn't fair.
I feel like the best card in that matchup is the blue Sacred Beast. Like
the turtle that stops blocking. That stops blocking.
Just, like, that card's probably insane in the matchup, and it's just like, if you draw it, you can't cast it unless you see your blue stones. Like, so you're really just looking for Sisei as much as possible. And again, like, you both are completely and 100% dependent on your Regalia.
It, right? So you really would.
You just need to, I mean, like, you need to find the Sisei to bring out the turtle. That's like the most important part.
Yeah.
And it's like
it's very interesting. I think Melgus has better reach.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What?
Faster. I would say faster reach.
Yeah, faster reach. Like you can just like deal 20 with Melgus on like turn 3, but you're really not dealing that much damage with like Super Beast Rush or anything. So
yeah, like the messed up thing is like once you judgment and Goddard, like you're still not gassed out because like that Goddard also drew you 2 cards, which is flippin' fair.
Yeah.
The problem is you judged and you didn't call a stone that turn. That's like what feels the worst about judging with Melgus to me. Like even though you're usually doing it for 0 mana, the fact that you didn't call a stone and then you dealt all your damage, but now your Levitans don't have any enter abilities because your J Ruler's flipped and like
and they're
you
never
either
going
swing
to attack
for 10.
it.
Yeah,
clearly
like
you have never bloody breaked your own Melgus.
I definitely have not. You're right. You got me there.
Man, there was one game I was playing. There was one game I was playing. I had a mitt full of Regalia. I did my flip, got him to like 12, and then I bloody braked my own thing and played like 3 Regalia to burn him. And I'm just like, let's go.
Sometimes Melgus wins because it can.
I have not ever lived that life. I'm a fool. I'm an absolute fool.
But I think we can apply that same logic that you're talking about in terms of Melgus, like not necessarily the favoritism, but like Regalia decks in general, regardless of which one you're building, except Lenneth, can
whoa! I'm 2-0 with Lenneth.
Can sometimes just like say, okay, I win now. Like, and it's not necessarily. Like,
definitely Lenneth doesn't do that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So like those decks can just suddenly kind of go, okay, the game's over, and but also just as much as that deck can, any of those decks again except for Lenneth can say, okay, the game's over. All of those decks can go, did you have a good time? Because I didn't do anything. Like, like just as equally can do that. Like they can just kind of go like, I'll set my cards down and let you have a good time. Like that's absolutely true. Whereas opposed to if you talk about like Perfect Loki, if you talk about like Adam decks, if you talk about Hanzo, like those decks regardless of what they're doing, even based on how color greedy they are, they're always going to be playing the game. Like they're always going to be in it from beginning to end in some capacity. Regalia decks decks sometimes just don't show up. They're just like, whatever.
Yeah. In my experience, the Divinity decks were consistent in interaction.
Correct.
Where like now we're trading that for just raw power.
Right.
And like that's essentially like the strangers versus divinity
balance, right? Which like, surprisingly has had a good like balance, at least as of now. Especially since divinity rulers get access to more levels of interaction now that they have the dual stones. So you get like that.
So we had
but not the best ones. Like they've done a really good job of holding back like
green white next set, bro.
Like the green white, the green, the black green. Like
the amount I have desired black green is just uncountable. Like it's. Yeah. Like it's incredible.
I will say this. Releasing as we are, like this next set we're gonna get. So this next set we're looking at the artwork and everything else. It seems like we're gonna get green, white, green, black, and the
red,
artwork
blue.
Red, blue.
No,
which interestingly,
red, blue,
green, white,
red,
black.
blue, right? Red, blue, green, white, green, black.
Yeah,
and then
Rezard,
black,
Arla, and blue red for reflective
green, black already. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So then, like, interestingly enough, that's going to power up a lot of different stuff. It's also going to let Lenneth, potentially based on what color reflect refrains are, whether they're mage arts or sword arts, it's suddenly going to let Lenneth branch out a little bit more to get more mage arts that are necessarily there. It's crazy. I think
they're mage arts, I'm pretty sure.
We'll have to. I mean, I can't imagine they're not. But like
theoretically, you would hope so that you don't just get like 8 sword arts and 2 mage arts.
I just meant like from the color perspective. Like we have blue white as sword art, and we have blue green as sword art. So then blue black would be mage art, and then blue red should also be mage art. If everyone gets 2 sword, 2 mage, that's what I'm imagining is going to happen. But I mean, who knows, right?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Lenneth and Cluster can beat machines. I'm looking at this. So Minha's telling us that Lenneth and Cluster can beat machines very easily.
I don't think beating machines and Cluster is very much of a feat. It's Prissya, right? Prissya is the Cluster behemoth.
Adam only became good the last 2 sets. That's how far he is going to be with the last 2 sets in Alice Origins. Potentially. I mean, giving Faria access to green-white, like, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see.
So one thing I talked about a couple episodes ago even is just like, I think that we're going to see set 1 is where, okay, these are strangers and they're really cool, but divinity decks still run the format. Set 2 is when you start seeing like some stranger decks like show potential of tier 1, but I still think divinity is like where you want to be. And then I said that set 3 is going to be where the stranger decks really start to take over. And in my mind, like the fact that we're getting green white and green black duels for Athenia and Kaguya, like I'm actually a little bit terrified if that prophecy, if my words of gospel hold true. And then like set 3 is where we actually see strangers really make their mark, because the tools that divinity deck get from these dual stones becoming available is actually just obscene. It is fully unlocking the power of DBV in a way that we haven't been able to really see so far. So like what happens when everything else gets more sword arts, more mage arts, more regalia in their color, and then also, 3 more stranger rulers. It's looking to be a very, very high power format, and I'm excited for it a lot.
Yeah, I am too. Like the other thing is like the power level is high, but like the power level is high in so many different ways, and I think that's been the big takeaways throughout Force of Will's history. When we've seen high power, it's just been like a consolidation of power into like one thing, like so much often. And what we're seeing right now with this cluster is that like the power is high in very different ways that you really can't like consolidate. Like you can't play Prissya cards in a Machina deck. Like you can't play like Machina cards in an Atom deck. Like they're just not going to do what they're supposed to do. And so like you have this diversification of the power that we just haven't seen before, which I think is one of the things that's lending itself to situations like where Prissya is not truly the tier 0 virus that we maybe were anticipating in seeing a card like this so long ago. Which I think is great. I think it's absolutely great for the competitive scene, for the casual scene, and everything else. It does lead to some very, very frustrating moments where you're just like you think you've got it, and then your opponent's like, "Oops, I win." But like that's card games, right? That's like total variance. And I would make myself go watch the episode where we talked about thought mentality being totally hyper focused on top deck, and like we naturally play card games. That's natural variance. That's going to happen. But I think it's important to recognize that like you need to respect that happens in card games, and not let it skew your opinion on the meta, but also let it inform your testing in a way that's successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise you're gonna get screwed and angry and gonna be not having fun.
I'm still gonna get angry. Don't worry.
That's fair.
Every time I lose to a Prissy deck, I'm like, did I really misplay there, or did I just get taken out back in an alley and beat to death? Like
I was playing against. So this is speaks to a similar situation to that. I was playing against Stuart, and he was playing Prissy, and I was playing Adam. and we were playing at the end, and I took a play line that, in going back and doing testing about it, I very clearly should not have made, but because I did, I was not set up, and I got like top deck hit. And this was a situation where like I went to try to go haiku. I went to try to go set up for a haiku for that turn, even though I absolutely didn't need to, because I was still in a really good position, and it set me up to only have enough will to play one of the 2 Kagis in my hand, and then the last stone that Stuart hit on that turn was a blue stone, so he was able to cast Super Burning Beast Rush and have the will for the Erendite for the 1 Kagia. And it's like, that situation, going back and testing on it, yes, I had misplayed. Did I really need to take that? And that's why testing is so important. Like, did I really need to take that play line to be in a winning state at that moment? Like, was that the most optimal play? To prevent, again, hedge your bets and try to play through it. Was that the thing I needed to do? And so I fell victim. I fell victim to the virus, and I got killed by Prissya by that situation. You just got to keep learning. Like, we just got to keep evolving in this format, and I think that's kind of what makes the format super fun to me, is because we definitely haven't solved it, and even if we've solved it, there's still so many different play lines to play that like you actually have to sit down and think and play it through. It's not just brain dead format the deck like it was with Red Green Prissya. Did I hit Levitin and another Regalia? Did you have a Scythe? No? Cool, the game's over. Like, like it's not that kind of brain dead format. And so I think that's the big takeaway that I think I want the community to hear is like, yes, we get it. Prissya is very, very strong, but there are things that you can do to best prepare yourself and make it so that you are able to prepare yourself for it better. Take the precautions.
Go to the store and buy a crap ton of toilet paper.
Don't do that.
And that'll protect you.
Don't do that.
That'll protect you from Prissya.
Ruler
School does
not condone hoarding of any basic necessities. Please be good people to each other and don't do that. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, I still feel like Regalia decks are just so dependent on the Regalia. So cards like Seal of Lenneth are just super, super good. And like Machina's my kind of like stranger boogeyman for perhaps next GP, just because we don't know what's coming out in Ghost in the Shell. We only know that the ones we've seen so far are machines, and it's like, wow, if you just print any like 1-drop machine that's good, like this could be terrifying. So
and if you judge based on the colors, it's just like literally blue and colorless, and you're just like, who else is this gonna help? It's like literally only one deck.
Yo, they wouldn't do that, right? They wouldn't. The set at least is probably going to be color balanced, right? Maybe not the starter deck, but
we'll see.
The other thing that's interesting to note is that the set itself, if any kind of indication comes off of the setup for the starter deck, has no Regalia and has no strangers.
The starter deck?
The starter deck
has 4 Regalia in it.
It does not. It has been updated.
Yes. Oh, it has? It changed?
It has been updated on the website. There is no Regalia and no strangers in that starter deck.
What?
Interesting.
That's a really weird mistake for them to have originally made, though. Who was counting?
It could
be. I got it. Oh my god, I know what happened.
So sometimes you just copy and paste something that you did before, and so.
And sometimes, the other thing is too is I have to imagine that there's a lot of potential because we haven't seen spoilers yet, right? So let's talk about this. So because we haven't seen spoilers yet, there's a very real chance that the production team behind the Ghost in the Shell set might have been very heavily involved in the designing of the product. So there is a potential line of when they were shown the initial cards, there was the idea to make them a stranger deck, the idea to make them a Regalia, and so that was presented when it was first pitched. But then since then, the company that was part of the production design has maybe had influence and said, no, that's not something we want within our mechanics of our exclusive set. Take it out. So like that's just a theory. It's just a theory.
I think every time Jeremy has the theory, we just need to have like something that says like get out your notepad.
Yeah.
Theory.
Not every time
Not
every time I say a theory means that it's actually true.
That doesn't really
we catch on.
What had happened was they just made 0 mana cards and they're like, oh, those are Regalia, and they're like, no, it's not.
It's not Regalia. No,
we don't do that anymore.
Got it.
It ain't like that anymore.
Yeah.
We just have cards that can become 0 costed.
I will say that I am very impressed. Like, one of the things that I was like a little fearful for is when they were just like, yeah, let's make these new machines blue-green too. And I'm just like, wow, that'll work out flipping great. Yeah. Like, the other machine deck was like this close to getting there, but then like they all came out and I'm like, oh wait.
You know what's hilarious
there's really not a lot of interaction here.
There isn't. That's what's crazy about the two blue machine archetypes. Is like
there's not a lot of overlap.
It's like +1/+1 counter based, and the other one is like Maribella Voltron. So it's like they're really not that similar.
But it's still +1/+1 counters out the wazoo on the Maribella. So you think you would get a whole lot of action out of like Deus Ex, out of Clockwork Girl,
but you don't.
Even Lancelot. But it's like, wow, Deus Ex costs 2. I can't pay 2 on something that's not Maribella. Like, I don't know.
Well, honestly, once you start like I've done it, like, so we're starting to look into like Lancelot as like one of tech and Machina for the mirrors and shit. So it's
how
like,
crazy is that? Go back a year, tell me machines are tier 1, and tell me you're thinking about maybe one Lancelot. Like,
right? What? Right? But like, dude, I've played the match and I'm like, oh man, cool. I've got this Maribella who's got 10 counters, but like, I don't actually can't make it a resonator yet. Oh, fuck.
Oh yeah, there's like, just so much more that deck needs to do, and that's just like better. Like,
yeah, exactly. But they're like totally different. I'm just like, I was like, I did not see that coming.
No, they both get to play the Guinevere combo. There you go. That's the overlap.
There you go. Yes. There it is. There's the overlap.
I'm in way too many group chats, as you may have seen on my Facebook, and I'm like talking about Force all the time. One of my favorite things that I've said on repeat for the past 3 months is that if you're going to play a card that costs 3 mana, and it actually costs you 3 real mana, that card has to win you the game and suck your dick. And Lancelot only wins you the game. He only does one of those things. So it's just
I swear that was 4 last time we talked. Are we at 3 now?
We're at 3 now. Yeah, like it has to do both of those things, or else it's just not a playable card in this format.
Oh, I swear this was like maybe a couple months ago.
It used to be 4, but now it's 3. We've gone down. Like, it's Athenia. I think is the only card that does that. By the way,
that's like literally the card I had in my head. I was like,
oh, it doesn't do it. Those requirements. Like, Lancelot does not do both of those things. Lancelot only wins you the game. It's not good enough. So that's just the only.
So
Baba
7 cost rabbit resonator in my deck that does nothing when you play it.
That's fine. It doesn't.
Hey, that card actually costs 2 when you play it.
You're not ever playing it for 8.
No. My rune deck doesn't even let me play it for its reduced cost.
Oh right, because you can't flip over 5. So we do have Babatunde in the chat. Actually brings up an interesting point. New Ghosts in the Shell machines is just going to be like artifacts, which I think could be very interesting. We've already seen something similar in the sense of like machine additions and everything else. Machine has done a lot of addition stuff in the past, so that would be kind of an interesting idea to take for Ghosts in the Shell.
Do you think it's possible that we are judging the contents of this starter deck and set by 2 promos a little bit too much?
No, like, I don't think it's all machines. I don't even think it's all machines. I don't think
we are judging based on color.
Okay, has anyone actually seen Ghost in the Shell, like the anime?
Yes,
I have.
I have. Yeah.
Is the anime about machines? Like,
there's a lot of technology involved, but it's not a ton of like machines. That's why I'm saying like the typing of the things. There's a lot of different like liberties that people are taking with in terms of the typing, right? So the typing could be all machines. The typing could be cyborgs. The typing could be humans. The typing could be soldier. The typing could be.
How mad would you be?
I'd be really shocked if like Kusanagi and Makoto wasn't a machine. Like that would be kind of weird. But like,
there's other characters and stuff. Like,
that are not machines. That are not machines.
Dude, that would be like classic Force of Will, though.
How insane is it going to be when this set comes out and like there's like one machine and it's Kusanagi and the rest of it's like not even like we're just like judging so much based on these 2 promos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Cyborg, Android, Section
so the
7.
thing is like the Makoto's like the main character or whatever. So they're like the fact that she's a machine and we get to see her first is to hype the set, and then she's just incidentally a machine, and machines are incidentally just a very good archetype in Force Will. When they introduce the other characters, other set pieces, other equipments or whatever that they're gonna have, like it's very possible that just like none of it is machine, and then we only got
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think we might be a little overexcited.
I mean, there's even a character in the show who specifically is cited as like having no cybernetic enhancements. Like they kind of like make fun of him for it. In
Wait. Is he?
And they're gonna be a broken 2-drop human.
Yeah, like a broken 2-drop human.
Right. Let's go.
Yeah, it's like there's a
Let's
character who's
go.
just like, you could go get an upgrade, you could go get this, and he's just like, no, I don't want any of that stuff. But he's still like a really good, like he's still a prominent character. Like
What
I think
what
that
is Kusanagi Makoto like in the anime? Is
she
like
is like the main character. She is like
right,
the
sure, but like, is she a machine? Is she a
cyborg,
Like,
essentially. She's an
okay,
artificially
so
created
she's like
there
a
are
brain
other
in a
like
shell.
cyborg.
Like
Yeah.
a ghost, maybe, you know? Like
She's-
Whoa,
yeah.
Whoa, okay. I get it.
Whoa,
I see.
lore. Theory time.
we're doing all this like hype on like how machines are going to be insane when this comes out. They're going to give us that broken 2-drop human, and then Brunhild, Derek Maguneza wins the whole event. It's just
Done. There it is.
Amen.
we're out of it.
There it is.
I
Derek's
will
win.
say though, I am like, with it being Ghost in a Shell, and with this being what? How many cards? 60.
It's a
70?
78 card set.
That's 78 original cards, no reprints, right?
I mean,
I mean, are you reprinting in your promotional for this?
probably not.
You know?
Like business wise, I can't imagine that the Ghost in the Shell people would be like, oh yeah, we're fine with you putting your other stuff in
Yeah,
here. Like
yeah,
they'd
there
want
you
it to
go.
be like, this is our thing. Don't touch it.
Yeah.
We're making our own stuff.
So
Okay, but like the Vingolf sets had like a bunch of nonsense in them. Like I guess that's not like the same
Vingolf
thing,
2
but
didn't, right?
Vingolf 2 was all new
Valkyrie
stuff.
Chronicles.
Vingolf 2
2 was all
is that the
branded.
one that
Whatever
had
the
like
game was.
the Valkyrie
The tanks.
Chronicles
The
or
Yeah,
whatever?
the
Valkyrie,
tanks.
Oh, hmm.
That was all new
There was
stuff.
nothing reprinted there. Vingolf 3
Dual
only had the
stones,
reprints.
dual
It was a
stones.
skill.
Oh, there it is. He got it.
Got
Well
him.
done.
Got him.
Well
The
Reese.
done.
resource we
Thank
need to
you.
play our game.
We got it.
But I will say this is going to be the biggest set that we've had since the new company has taken over.
With 100% new cards, yes. Especially if we consider
Like just
that
new cards. Yeah, this
if
will
the
be,
structure decks are 100% unique cards from the
God,
set,
that's going to be interesting.
that would be approximately, between the set and the starters, we'd be sitting at about 95 completely unique cards.
95 completely, and then a month later,
90, maybe 90 completely unique cards.
and then a month later releasing
3 weeks later.
maybe. Yeah, 3 weeks later releasing. So like pumping out like 100 plus new cards in 3 months.
Yeah. Minneapolis is
Okay.
going to be exciting.
I see you, Foco. I see you.
Excuse me,
I'm
it's I
nervous.
Spy now?
I spy you, Foco. I spy you. Wait. Oh, wait. Hold on.
It's kind of funny that like Vegas was the last event on this meta, and then Minneapolis is the only event on that meta, and then there'll be another set before Houston or Canada or whatever's next after that.
Yeah.
June and July we'll have so there'll be 3 GPs post AO3 meta. That sounds right. Because
That's
Two
so
weekends, though,
dangerous.
right?
it's just 2 weekends. Because June there's 2 on the same weekend, and then July is the second one. It's Dallas.
There's one in August, isn't there?
There is one in August, but that should be set for
So
Interesting. Okay.
basically,
June,
pay
July,
attention
August.
Yeah.
because if they shut down the Canadian border, like get over it now so that you're ready.
Then how do I get to Minneapolis? Hold on a second.
I mean, there's enough snow and woods up there. You could probably sneak. Just
put on
It's
a
not
friend.
like-
Force of Will does not. Force of Will does
Defending
not. Ruler School does not condone illegally immigrating into different
I
countries.
see Ryan showing up just like icicles. He's like, I've come from the north. Just like cards.
I just
Play-
got like some firewood to burn on the way back, like in my backpack to keep me warm. Like it's gonna be great.
to play at an event that he doesn't need to play in because he's already got a paid invite.
Gotta see the homies, man. Gotta see the homies.
It is. It's true. It truly is, in spite of everything. And I will say this. This is an interesting thing. So people have been playing a lot more on Discord. So if you haven't, or sorry, a lot more on Untap. So if you haven't already, please go check out
But that's Europe.
Untap.in. It's a lot of Europe.
Those boys
It's a lot of Europe, but
quarantined.
also, but also a lot of like. There's a lot of people to play against right now. And Untap announced today that they are adding extra servers, so they should be able to handle the volume for it. So that's definitely a way if you're stuck doing that. I do want to also say that for the next few weeks, most likely not this week because we already had it recorded, but for next week and the future weeks, we'll probably be doing Untap feature matches on Wednesday, simply because my locals is shut down. So I can't get footage that way. But we're still going to bring you content. Like, we're still going to be here. We're still going to be doing deck profiles. We're still going to be doing everything else. It's just going to look a little different. And so the key takeaway, just like everything else, in the real situation and in the meta situation, is keep yourself safe, keep yourself informed, play to make sure you take as many precautions as possible, play to your outs and play through it, because that's just
On
what
the
we need to do.
topic of keeping yourself safe and playing on Untap more, I have a recommendation for all of the Americans out there. If you're going against someone random on Untap, I recommend typing in chat "Habla Español," and if they say yes or C, just leave. Just level up on some Italians or some Germans before you go for those Spanish guys because they're terrifying. that's my bit of advice.
There you go.
Ascertain what country they're from and then use that to assess their skill level. There you go.
Yeah. No, Spanish guys are terrifying, man.
Spanish guys are gonna like anti-meta this, and they're just gonna be like, no.
They play way too much Force of Will. I like this world's showed me the light, man. I can't tell you enough. Like. It's crazy.
So until then, though, we are going to call it here for tonight. So thank you guys so much. As always, if you want to support us, click that join button down below. And until next time, this has been myself, DMO73, and I have been joined by Ryan Miles.
Yeah.
And I have been joined back once again, hopefully for longer this time, Brandon Bremont.
It's good to be back.
And as always, Josh Patton. And we will see you guys next week. So until then, class dismissed. Have a good one, everybody. Gosh.